stole my shoes.
Oh, these are pretty cool bananas.
In jobs, as with life, we all have to start somewhere. So when I saw an opening for janitor on the space station, I took it. My mother and I shared a one-bedroom apartment at the time, and I knew if I could work my way up, I could give us a better life. So I signed up. I wasn't ready for how my first shift would unfold. I arrived on a shuttle and immediately stepped off to tour the station. And a cum stain spewed on the tile. I looked both ways to make sure no one was watching and went right past it and straight to the bar. If I was going to have to clean the station, I was going to need a strong drink first. As I walked in, I was graced by a piano rendition of Paint It Black. Little did I know that would be a harbinger of what was to come. I requested a rum and coke from the bartender, Mr. Bep Bep Summer. When I got it, I sipped and listened to the rendition of It's Been So Long, met a mime who was lugging around a fuel crate, and learned that there was a special drink that could revive assistance if you used fuel. I'm still not entirely sure if that was true or bullshit, but I was new. Best to go with the flow than to swim upstream. When I saw the chef losing his fucking mind, I decided it was time to get up and leave. I complimented the piano player and set off, determined to figure out how I could dodge serious calls for a janitor and just dick around on company time. I wandered for a bit until I found the station's common areas, which no one inhabited because everyone was too busy doing their jobs, unlike me. And that's where I encountered a horrible sight in the bathroom. Fucking puke everywhere. I went around looking for anything to clean it up, but I hadn't really been briefed on my job or where to find the service equipment. In all honesty, they had issued me a badge and sent me on my way without so much as a training video. I guess the burden was on me. How hard could cleaning really be, right? I walked past the cabin rooms to notice one of them was locked. I tried the door a few times to no avail. I figured that whoever puked in the bathroom due to sickness or shitface was probably sleeping it off inside. And that's when I wandered in my own cabin and produced the first publication of Janitor Chronicles.
Well, someone puked in the cock-sucking bathroom. Thanks, guys.
And with that, I set off, and I met him for the first time. HG656, the robotic chaplain. I introduced myself and asked what he was doing, to which he replied,
Satchel.
and fucked right off. So, of course, I issued Janitor Chronicles number 2 mere minutes after the first entry.
Some cloaked dude was poking around in the citizen rooms or whatever the fuck they're called. Upon inquiring what he was doing, for the fuck of it as I have no regiment authority, he simply replied,
Satchel.
I wish I knew what the fuck was going on. Also, not cleaning the fucking bathroom.
And with my resignation to being a janitor, I set off to see what else I could find aboard this strange ship. My attention was called to some of the back alley routes as the piano player from earlier darted through. Intrigued, I went to see what he was running from. I found a strange room with plushies and instruments. Seems like a strange kink room or something, but to each their own. I didn't need to be poking around someone else's shit. I wandered some more, saw the VR room, and then realized my role on the ship was literally useless. And just when things get boring, I ended up where anyone else ends up when life gets stagnant, oozing for booze. I got another rum and coke and watched as someone pied the captain of the ship in the face and stole his shoes. He then gave them to me. I left and made my way to SEC to see if anything interesting was going on when I ran into the piano man from earlier named Gail Wallach. I said his piano skills sounded good and went off. I managed to get into the SEC wing and find an abandoned dog. I decided I needed to have him and waited for someone to get me out. The warden was on the computer when I asked him to let me out. After he ignored me, I said some mean shit and took the dog with me. Finally, the warden got up off his ass and let me out, but not before stripping the dog away from me. Apparently, it was his. Marshall McDougal officially kicked me out. I called him a dick and marched back to the bar, where I drank an entire bottle of the strongest shit they had to offer. It had a skeleton on it, so it had to be strong. I fell and puked my guts out, and Gail saved me. He picked me up and brought me to the hospital and took care of me. When I came to and was able to walk, he told me not to drink. I told him I'd stick to water, and then I turned to ask the hospital staff if they had heroin. Of course they didn't. Useless fucking medical staff. I began wandering once more around the ship until I found the Church of the Robotic Chaplain from earlier, HG656. He was in the middle of crafting some strange synth cult shit when I came in, but to his credit it looked really cool. I wandered some more inside, but then he confronted me.
Stay. The fuck out. Of my back room.
I felt bad, so I asked if he wanted to see something cool while I dropped the captain's shoes in front of him. He didn't care, so I shrugged. Then I told him he really was a cold, unfeeling robot, to which he completely glitched the fuck out in front of me. I left. The robotic chaplain was very suspicious to me. Something felt rather off about him. When he left, I immediately dove back into the church and straight into his back room. I went into his back room, but it wasn't as awe-inspiring as I thought it would be. Nothing but the usual church backroom stuff, and if anything was worth noting, I'd have to have access. I was just a lowly janitor. There was no access for me. I left, said hi to the moth and robotics, and then made my way up to the medbay where Gale was beating the shit out of a clown. I approached curiously, but that caused him to swing his keyboard and crack me over the head with it. That's when Officer Beepski stunned and cuffed me for no apparent reason. Thankfully, Gale was nice enough to get the zip ties off of me. I made my way back to the clown and observed in horror. He was a barely human abomination that pissed off the gods. Gale beat the shit out of him and then sent him down the trash chute where all abominations belong. I was inclined to believe he was dead. Gale petitioned the front desk of Medbay for some drugs to sell. I said I wanted acid, but Gale wanted meth. Nothing really became of our requests, and I got bored, so I asked Gale to send me down the trash chute. After a fun ride, I was spit back out at cargo, only to realize the clown must have lived. He was nowhere to be seen. But I did find a label maker. I thought it'd be really funny to label random things in the robot church as bitch, so I ended up borrowing the labeler and tried putting it in my bag while it was on. When I got there trying to figure out the device so I could name his things bitch, he asked me what I wanted. I decided to play ball and told him I wanted God. He asked me what God I thought I'd find, to which I replied I didn't know. I wanted to be as unassuming as I could. I labeled a light bulb as bitch, so my mission was partially successful, but this serene, tranquil music began to play throughout the church. After a moment, he told me the mechana does not see worth in me. I said fair enough. I asked him if I could find worth, to which he told me the synthetic conversion was possible as long as I brought him charged power cells. Something about that sounded fishy as fuck, but I wasn't going to start being a by-the-book janitor this late into my shift. I accepted the mission in hopes of seeing what this bot was all about and went over to the news wall to write a new entry in the Janitor Chronicles series.
Weird chaplain guy says for self-worth need to find charged power cells. I
set off on my journey before dropping my bag randomly in the hallway. Just as I set the bag on the floor, Gale ran past me.
No, my fucking meth.
I quickly followed to see what all the fuss was about, and according to Gale, the chemist he had making the drugs blew himself up. That's when Brian Diggers, colored like the Incredible Hulk and always screaming, came into the fold. I told him he should make some meth before asking if he had Tourette's due to his constant random cursing fits. He said yeah before replying,
"That's too annoying to make. Here's cocksucker, and all you do is go fast."
Eventually, Gale and I found ourselves back at the bar where we stumbled into the security head of personnel shooting what I thought was a real gun at one of the patrons. Then the patron stood up. All was fine. The crassness of the head of security took me off guard. Unable to stop farting, he watched through the window before stumbling back inside and asking the patron to shoot him. He ended up hitting Gale instead. Things in the bar calmed down, Gale stood up, and then the head of security walked into the hallway and fucking died. He actually fucking died. Everybody rushed outside, but I guess Gale had some sort of magic touch. The head of security stood to his feet, got slapped in his face, and farted in response. Good as new. Despite the explosion in the distance, Trent, the head of security, was immediately called to attention by Gale stealing his shoes. He ran after Gale, and then suddenly the patron from the bar fainted. I got him back to his feet and then went to see where Gale and Trent went. The notes of Paint It Black were being played as Trent fired his stunner to stop him. He ended up hitting me a few times, but I stood up for my friend and got Trent to calm down. I passed it off as an incident that tends to happen, and he got a hold of himself and marched off. Gale gave me Trent's boots later on, but I decided not to return them and instead dropped them in a random hallway and ran back to the chaplain. I told him I couldn't find charged power cells. He gave me another option and then pointed behind him. The stupid servant I had grown to be, I obeyed. Before I could understand what was happening, I found a red wire wrapped around my neck. He told me the mechano would speak with me as a choir began to play, and that I simply had to do something, but he didn't finish. I cracked him in the face to no avail. I sat there gasping for air as my life flashed before my eyes. That time in 5th grade that I shit my pants, my mother, getting on the shuttle, why oh why hadn't I just cleaned up the fucking bathroom? I struggled so hard to get loose, accidentally punching myself, but finally, I dropped to the floor. I began desperately clawing my way towards the exit, and he followed every step. I left, and he took out a rod named McCanna's Will and chased me with it, hitting me. He chased me across the station, but I managed to get all the way to Sec, and that's when Trent became my savior. He shot disabler rounds at the bot and allowed me to seek shelter. Then the warden, Marshall McDougal, the guy I was an ostentatious dick to, was the nicest person ever to me. He even brought his dog. He was extremely nice and asked if I was just hanging out and allowed me to stay. Then Cassandra, the nurse in the sec wing, helped me out by healing me the best she could. When I got out, I saw the chaplain was in custody. Sec had finally done something useful. I made my way to the bar with a plan. I was gonna fuck the church up. It was a monument to the sick will of Mechana, and I had to make sure no one else got fooled. The original bartender was gone, but I did notice a bloody cleaver in the back room. I made my assumptions and played it cool because the Hulk with Tourette's was the guy working the bar now and had access to a gun. I asked him for a rag for my forehead, but I was actually trying to make a Molotov cocktail.
No clue or rag, but if you're trying to make fire water, I don't know if beer works.
He was really helpful. I thanked him for his tip, but ensured him beer would work. I just didn't have a rag. I figured if I broke the bottle in the church and threw my lighter at it, it had to start some kind of fire, so I set off. I got to the church, ready to do my glorious deed, when suddenly a random guy came up to me.
Hey, dude!
Then I went completely blind, and I couldn't talk. The second attempt on my life was unfolding. I heard the sound of a scream as well as some kind of blade, and immediately I used my memory to stumble away from him. My eyes burned horribly, but the blindness wore off some. I was barely able to see, but I stumbled my way back to the sec office to report. Instead of listening, they had me sit in interrogation with the chaplain bot. I requested to leave atop the sound of Trent passing more gas, and set out from sec, telling them I didn't even wish to press charges. I was completely disillusioned. I left and wandered around the ship until I saw a gigantic fucking monkey near the medbay.
Hello, monkey.
Gale then smacked the ape in the back of the head, and safe to say, the ape went apeshit about it. As the monkey chased after Gale, I chased after it. I was already delirious. I cracked the monkey in the back of the head too, and the situation escalated as we both got our asses kicked. I found a stun baton and began to unleash my vengeance on the monkey. He then broke my right arm. I continued to crack.
Arrest them.
I was taken aback that he spoke. The monkey spoke. Sec stormed in and placed me on the floor, and I surrendered my stun baton. Gale was arguing that he didn't know the monkey was sentient.
Next time I take all the limbs off.
After I agreed to put everything behind me and Sec stopped escalating the incident, I limped my way to evac where I saw Trent and the bar patron fucking around. I just wanted to go home. Eventually I was able to get off of the blasted station, but I'm sure as money gets tighter, I'll eventually clock in somewhere else at another time.